Righto, everyone should be able to see my screen. Okay, so we'll kick off now. I know people are still joining us. So welcome this afternoon to a ballot reconciliation meeting. I know it says Thursday, 10th of May. Apologies, that's just a bit of slapdash on my part that forgot to change Thursday to Friday when I was doing the slides. It is Friday. I'm sure we all know that weekend's coming. Usually we do conformance Fridays, but today we're doing ballot reconciliation. And this is our second last ballot reconciliation, and with our last one coming up on May 16th. So today's agenda, we're going through our usual business that we do for a typical TDG. Again, this is Friday, I realise, not Thursday. Give a bit of a ballot update on where we are and how we're tracking. Today we're going through the results of the AU core block votes from 9 to 12 and the items referred to telecom, which this time there's only been one of those items that's been referred to telecom. So we're intending to go through, talk about that today and then vote on that in today's meetings. We also have postponed this meeting, going through revisiting or querying if as a TDG we're going to reopen and revisit the decisions on must support for individual pronouns and gender identity. This was originally scheduled for our Thursday, 2nd of May, but we didn't have the right people in that session, so we didn't have Heath and Ruben available there, so we needed to postpone that. Heath and Ruben have indicated they're going to be available today. I see Heath online. Ruben isn't yet, so fingers crossed Ruben is going to be here when we get to it, but I'll double check then. Otherwise, we will need to again postpone that to our May face-to-face. If we get through all of that, we're going to go through what our next and last block votes are. Now, these are open, so the final set of votes for AU4 are open now and remain open to next Wednesday, and we'll be going through those results in our face-to-face, that hybrid meeting actually, on Wednesday. And I'll go through a little bit about that meeting. And depending on how we track today, there's a couple of other things that we can be running through. Some change requests that we wanted to do a walkthrough of before we had ballot, but we haven't got to yet. So we could go through that or some of the other items, but we'll see how we're traveling for time. So let's go through our usual business, which is approval of minutes of our last meeting. So they've been up for review. I think one change has been made by someone, and I'm not aware of any outstanding feedback. So is someone happy to motion for approval of those minutes?
I'll motion to approve those.
Thanks, Michael. Is anyone happy to second approval of those minutes?
I'm happy to second it, Landon.
Thanks, Landon. So I'll put up our poll for approval. Just go through that now. So you should see that come up with your options. If this is one of your first meetings and you've not seen this before, please go ahead and click. If you weren't at this meeting, then what you would do is you would select abstain, and we'll just go through and get everyone to select their options for that motion. All right, almost done. Just a couple of people more to go to select an option. Okay, I'll end that poll there and I'll share those results. So no negatives, 18 affirmatives, 18 abstain. That motion has passed. Oops, sorry, 11 affirmative, 7 abstain. Thank you. All right, on to our next bit of business. So let's do updates. So what I'm going to do is do a quick run through of where we're up to in our ballot reconciliation. There are 199 issues overall. That's still not changed. out of all the triage, there's been 146 issues for TDG reconciliation. That number hasn't changed, so that is the number of issues that have needed to come through or do need to come through this group to vote on the disposition of. Here's where we're at today. So triage now is 100% done. All those issues have been run through and classified as like out of scope, or whether they're duplicates or whether they're incomplete. And they have now all been put into votes for the technical design group. Of those, we have as a design group already done reconciliation on 111. So we're 58% of the way through. We're on track, guys. It's pretty amazing. We've done a pretty fantastic job. And of those that we've made our reconciliation call, we have applied the changes. We've applied 42 changes to the current build of AU Core. So if you go there for the CI build, you'll see there are many of those changes are already coming through. And so we're a little bit less than halfway in terms of applying those changes. I'll also give you an update now on the AU base one. So out of the issues raised for AU Core, about 6 of those are actually AU base issues. And so they were passed on to the firework group to address. And the firework group has completed their triage on them. They've also voted and made dispositions on 5 of the 6 issues. There's only 1 to go. And the reason there's a 0% on applied to AU base is because all 5 of the issues have resulted in no change to AU base. They've either been voted as non-persuasive, or I think there was 1 item that has been voted as considered for future use. So depending on where that 6th one happens, this will turn into, I think, 100%. Either 1 change or no changes will end up being made to AU base out of those. So that's the update on those numbers, where we are in our meetings. So we've gone through at a pretty good pace. We've done our block votes up to that point, and we've voted, on 18 issues here. We did 48 here. And the Conformance Friday crowd has gone through and worked their way through on what is going to be our position on must support and obligation. And that has formed into 2 of the block votes that are out for vote now. And we're coming to today's meeting. So we're going to go through the results of block vote 9 to 12 and also revisiting those 2 issues. And that leaves us with the 53 issues basically for our last meeting. And it's looking like if we keep this progress, that actually will be our final ballot meeting. We won't need to have these additional 2 meetings. So we're on track, which is pretty amazing. So I'll come to this actually in the end about what our 18th day is. So we'll move past that. And I'll just do now to the results on the block votes in this meeting. So we've got block vote 9, which is substantive changes to AU Core and Counter, and that has passed. So we had a 15-0-0. In terms of the changes that have been agreed to be made, I'm just going to do a quick show of this as we go through them because we have time today, I think. So what that's resulted in, if that's big enough for people, is what we've got here is really the removal of some of the must support. So there's been a couple of the removals from must support, and also we voted negatively to not remove must support for a few of these items. So here we're going to go ahead and make changes to remove it from encounter identifier, from encounter hospitalization and its children, and also from encounter type. We're also going to fix up some of the relationship to healthcare service. So that's the changes that have been agreed to be made out of those issues. On block vote 10, which were the remaining substantive changes to allergy intolerance, that's also passed. So we added 12.1.2. Gillian has provided the comment on negative here. I've put this for the group. It's on the compliments page so you can read it. Now, Landon is going to work with Kylin to provide a response to Gillian so that we have that response coming from that negative comment. On block vote 11, which is our changes to medication, these are purely to remove must supports. And so what we've done and we've gone through has resulted in the removal of must support from things like medication form, an ingredient and its children, and medication manufacturer, and medication amount. So what that really leaves is medication code, and the slices on medication code are the only elements, I believe, with must support remaining in AU Core R1. Block vote 12 is about substantive changes to things like provenance, RESTful API, security and privacy. We made a bit of a reference in our last reconciliation meeting on the fact that there was a sort of superseding change to provenance coming up. And this has passed. So we got a 1301 result. So what that looks like, the changes we're going to make, is that AU Core provenance and therefore the requirement to, or even the search parameter rev include will be removed from AU Core R1. There's going to be some informative guidance added on AU Core's RESTful interactions with some diagrams. And we're also adding a beginning page around privacy and security with those requirements. And that's AU Core block vote 12. There is one item that's been removed from this block and referred to telecom to be discussed in today's meeting. And it's this one here. So this is the issue. I'll double check if Richard and Michael are on the line. Yeah.
Yep, I'm here.
Richard is.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this one. So this has been referred to telecom. So this is our 45113, which is a change block 5 support from should to may. So I'll just open this issue now for us, and we'll go through and have a look at that and why it's been referred to telecom. We'll open that to TDG discussion, and then we'll move to a vote. So that's this issue. So this has been raised from Isaac. And I'll let you read that rather than me just reading that out for you. And I'll go to where that is in the AU Core Fire IG. Under the capability statements, it defines support for other implementation guides, and it has bulk data as a should. So this issue is recommending that instead of should, that it's suggesting that it could be a may. The proposed resolution that was put out to the TDG to vote on was to change that from should to may. So the proposed resolution was, yes, we think this is persuasive. We will change that from should to may. And this was put out to vote. But it has been suggested that this needs to come to the TDG for discussion, so refer to telecom. Richard, do you want to talk to your points on what you think we need to discuss?
Yep. Okay. Yes. My basic idea is, do we want to bother even saying may? Is is it a useful thing to say may here? When do we want to say may? So saying may and saying nothing have the same effect, except that if you say may, you bring it to people's attention. And so there's some value in bringing it to people's attention. But once you start using may to bring things to people's attention, I think you can find yourself along a path of more and more and more things showing up as may. And then you can wind up with this continuing piece of work, adding the mays and deleting the mays, and it winds up being not particularly helpful unless you've got a clear idea as to what you mean, as to when you want to say may. I certainly agree that it shouldn't be should. It's just whether or not we want to explicitly say may, or whether we just want to be silent about it. What do other people think about whether we want to be explicit about the may, or whether we should just be silent?
In specific, yes, towards the bulk data. So I'll open that up for them for conversation. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I can probably just clarify why I thought it should stay a may. Given that in the capability statement, we do reference other mays for create, update, delete, read, patch. This is really another operation that applies in the same sort of context. If you're doing large volumes of data, that using a get is not an efficient way to do it, and bulk export is an efficient way of doing that. So it's really just highlighting that it is an option to use for retrieving data, and without being prescriptive about people having to use it. If you want to add to that?
I think it's different to create, update, delete, because they're actual intrinsic operations within Fire, whereas bulk data export is an additional implementation guide. And I don't think we've really had any discussion in Australia about the use of bulk data export at this point in time. So for me, I think that Richard's proposal of removing it altogether is the best approach at this point in time. Until we do have that discussion, I expect that we will have that discussion, and it will be something that we want to do in Australia, but I don't think it's the time is now. Having said that, I also think that the reference to international patient access within that same section is also probably in that same camp, that it should be not a should, and I would be interested in any background, whether I'm allowed to entertain that question on why IPA was included in that list as well.
So if you could raise that as a change request and we can table that in a TDG, okay, that'd be great.
Fine.
Okay, so we've had comments from Michael and Heath. Does anyone else want to comment on that?
Can I ask one question about that?
Yes.
Thanks. That was more of a prompt to see if my mic was working though.
Okay.
So if we take it out of the capability statement listed here under that page, does it? We're just saying that, you know, just remove it. There's no link into the capability statement or the implementation of the bulk data export implementation guide for this capability statement, and therefore it's just an optional implementation guide disassociated in this capability statement moving forward.
I believe the changes, so from the disposition, from where it is now as a should, is a recommendation. Yeah. Personally, I agree that I don't think it is a should. To move it to may, the items that are in AU Core as may are those that have been explicitly included because they have some relevance and people should be aware of them. And that's what gets tagged as may in AU Core. Personally, I think that bulk data does fall into that may, but perhaps we may decide to take it out for now, and then when we have the discussion, put it back in as a may. I think that's where we'll land, if not in R1. I think this would likely be back in R2 as a may.
Okay, that
And
makes
I-
sense.
Yeah.
And would we be including another section in this page that would just be may support the following implementation guides for that AU core client?
Yes, I believe it's just a list, the shalls, the shoulds, and if
Okay.
there was something that we highlighted as a may, which is really just bringing people's attention to this thing that is probably relevant at an overall level, that this can be supported, then that would be a may list.
Yeah.
I expect it just falls out of the tooling because in the capability statement, it's got there's a set of elements in the capability statement which list implementation guides, and attached to each of those elements is a thing saying shall, should, or may. And then the rendering process just takes those elements out of the fire capability statement resource and displays them this way.
Indeed. So are there any other further comments before we look to entertain a motion? Okay, it looks like we are happy to entertain a motion. I've managed to close my screen somehow. Let me come back to where we are. We're on this one. So does someone want to form a motion? The motion either needs to be to, I think, have bulk data export listed as may, or to remove the reference to bulk data export IG from AU Core. Who would like to form a motion, and what motion would you like to form?
I'll propose the strong motion first, and it being, I propose that we remove bulk data from the should list and do nothing more.
Thank you. So,
I'll second it.
okay. The motion is to remove the reference of bulk data export from the AU Core IG. That's motioned by Richard and seconded by Heath. Any other comments before we move to vote? Okay, I'll ask those who object to please raise your hand using the Zoom reactions, please. Okay, we have 3 people objecting. Okay, if you could put your hands down. And I'll ask for those who want to abstain, please raise your hand now. Okay, that number's still going. So it looks like we have 5 abstains. That's 3 negatives, that's 5 abstains. And the rest minus myself will be affirmative. Steph, your hand is up. Did you want to make a comment? No, you'll keep just keeping that there. Okay. So that motion is passed. We will be removing the reference to bulk data export from AU Core and R1. Thanks, everyone. Let's move to our next topic. So that was the only item that was referred to telecom out of those votes. So let's talk about revisiting the items. I think, Ruben, I saw you join.
I did.
Confirmation. Fantastic. We've got Ruben and Heath here, so we can go ahead with this item. So first off, I just want to do a little bit of background for people in the technical design group. As AU Core, this is going to be our first time we're looking at revisiting a TDG decision. There's a process for this, like there is for how we make our decisions in the first place, and that is all defined in our decision-making practices document, which is linked off our terms of reference for AU Core. And that's basically inherited from HL7 International. Now, what this really means is we don't really want to spend a lot of time coming back to decisions that have already been made, but that there are some circumstances in which it's meaningful to actually come back and consider whether or not we really do need to consider a choice that we've already made, possibly new information has come to light, possibly a different change in some sort of circumstance. And when we do this, reopening requires a formal motion and a second, and will require a 2/3 majority vote for the people online to revisit the decision. And then when we do, that's revisited, and we'll go through and discuss what that decision should be. And then hopefully we also get to, in this vote, in this meeting, then make a motion on those. So there have been 2 items that have been posited as being revisit. And those 2 are gender identity as must support in AU Core R1 and individual pronouns as must support on AU Core R1. I've got a little bit of background on this, and I put them both on the same slide because they're, I think, very closely linked. And so we have the original decision we made. They were both, I've linked the original sort of change requests here. We discussed those on the 8th of February, and we went through the approval of these. So for gender identity, that was 32 approve, 1 negative, 21 abstain. And for individual pronouns, that was 26 voted to approve, 4 negative, and 23 abstain. And there's some new JIRAs associated with this. And I'll just call to the person who raised these to speak about why they think they need to be revisited. So Heath, can you speak to both gender identity and individual pronouns?
I'm just trying to find my original ballot response just to make sure that do you have that handy, Danielle, or not?
I really should have done a hyperlink and I did not. Let me just get to it.
Is it 4518? Is that it?
Yes, it is
Okay,
45180 and 45181.
That's sufficient for me, thank you. So basically my
Hang
response...
on, sorry. Ruben has his hand raised. Ruben, did you want to comment before Heath speaks?
Sorry to interrupt, Heath. This was like something I think it's probably a good idea to sort out at the outset. These revisiting things are referring to must support, and clearly we are moving on from what must support was in that ballot to what we're talking about, what we've been talking about for the last few Fridays with obligations. So in light of that, I'm just wondering what people considering this proposal needs to consider must support to be.
Sarah. I believe people should consider must support to be that which is defined in our new proposal with obligations, which is the position formed from Conformance Friday. So that is in block vote 13 with this link, which is instead of be capable, the requirement is populate if known and to not error.
But that's not yet been voted on and decided, has it?
No, it's in the process of voting. I expect it will pass so far.
So procedurally, I'm just wondering if the cart's a bit before the horse here, Danielle, and is it not perhaps better to land what must support is going to become and then consider this in the context of that decision?
Well, I think this is part of my argument in the first place, is that at the time we voted on something that then later on we decided that we weren't quite sure what we're actually using as a basis for that vote. So when we got around to talking to sex assigned at birth, for example, that's when we really started to question things. So really that's why I'm looking to reopen this to some extent, is so that we can actually have that discussion in the new light of the new must support understanding. That's one part of my argument. and also the consistency on the fact that we don't have sex assigned at birth as must support, but we have these other two. So it's either one or the other, and I know, speaking with Danielle, she wants to sort of deal with them separately, and not today, the second one, because it wasn't part of the agenda. But that's really
Sorry,
my
no, I'll
argument.
clarify that I'm very happy for you to raise it, but my objection was that as chair prior to the meeting, I couldn't replace the agenda item that we'd advertised notifying talking about.
Yeah.
We can add an additional one, but I can't undo a thing that we'd already notified we were going to do.
Sorry,
So-
Heath, I wasn't. Go ahead.
No,
Well,
you go,
so
Ruben.
Heath
There
would
is
like
one other
to
part
discuss
part of my argument, but I'm happy just to close out that bit around my support before I
the
go to my
three-
second argument.
Yeah, I guess the three items together and consider them a package, that we either put must support on gender identity, individual pronouns, and sex assigned at birth, or none of the three. Is what I understand the gist.
I think they need to be considered in turn. These aren't all the same data element. They have different semantics. But what I would say is the question of what support or what must support is becoming in R1 is very germane to decisions around these other data elements. And thus, I feel you can't reasonably consider these in light of a premise that's not landed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that we're actually doing that yet. I think all we're voting on today is whether we're going to reconsider these decisions. Isn't that what we're voting on today, Danielle? Is more about
Yes.
the fact that we will perhaps even consider my ballot response again or not. That's what the first vote is going to be about, and we need to get 2/3 in favour of reconsidering before we even progress.
And
Yes.
you're comfortable to do that
I
given
am, yeah.
the uncertainty. Okay.
Well, I'm open to what the
I
committee
mean,
wants to do, or the group wants to do. So, yeah.
well, given you've said that, I'm going to make a motion that we defer discussion of revisiting this until we have made a decision on what must support means.
Which would be the 16th of May. At this stage would be the likely deferred point.
Is that the in-person meeting?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's not too far off. And I'm
Will you be there,
sure we
Ruben?
can do. I will be there.
Yeah,
We
no.
can certainly make these two. The decision about revisiting, and if we revisit as well, we can make those agenda topics straight after. I just don't think that it's reasonable to make up your mind on whether you want to revisit something when what's being revisited is subject to a change depending on another decision. So that's my motion, Danielle.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table. Ruben has motioned to defer this revisiting decision until the votes around the new must support and obligation proposal is complete, which is likely to be the 16th of May is our next meeting, scheduled directly after that vote closes. Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Okay.
I think that was Michael Wilson. Did you second?
Yeah, I did. There was someone else as well, but I might have
Okay.
voted.
Any further comments before we go to a vote on that? All right. So if you object to deferring the decision and would like to make the decision on whether we revisit it today, please raise your hand using the Zoom reactions. Okay, that looks like nobody. And if you would like to abstain from this, please raise your hand now in the Zoom reactions. All right, those are still climbing a bit. All right, that looks like we've got 6. So that's 6 abstain, 0 negative, and the rest will be affirmative minus me. So that motion is passed. So we will defer revisiting these to the next meeting we have following the decision on clarification of must support, which is expected to be that 16th of May day, the face-to-face / hybrid meeting. Barty, your hand is still raised. Did you have a comment, or is that just left over? Okay, that's left over.
No, just forget.
No problems, mate. All right, so let's move on from that. Okay, so let's talk about our next block votes. How are we traveling for time? Ooh, pretty good. Okay, so here's our next set of votes. These are out. They've been out for a few days. We've got some good voting already on them. Voting closes Wednesday next week. And this is the last set of block votes. This is the final stuff. So what we've got is block vote 13. And that's really what we were just talking about. The clarification with a new proposal on what must support will be in AU Core, which is the introduction really of the obligation extension and actor definitions. This has been worked through for the last, I think, like 5 conformance Fridays. And another vote related to that is the block vote 14, which is addressing the ballot items that suggested that we add must support to date time data choice in some of the profiles. That's also been discussed in our Conformance Friday group, and the proposal's been formed based on those discussions. We have block vote 15, which is substantive changes to AU Core immunisation. That's largely, I think, about removing must support on elements. Block vote 16 brings together the remaining substantive changes around AU Core procedure, AU Core condition, and observation profiles. So that goes across the vitals and measures, and it also goes across, I think, diagnostic result observation and pathology result observation. There's some substantive changes suggested there. Block vote 17 is medication request, which is about removing must support on elements in R1. And then block vote 18 has pulled together the rest of the items that are proposed to be considered for future use. In other words, these aren't not persuasive, but they are items considered for one reason or another that they won't be addressed in R1. Sometimes that's because a profile that the item talks about as it isn't in scope of R1, or it might be because the work itself is not feasible to come to a meaningful position in the timeframes of R1. And so it suggested that that would be R2, or we would reconsider them in R2. And I just want to talk a little bit about that. So on the reconsider for future use, when we get towards the end of this R1, so it'll be very early next year, we're going to get together and do a planning session on what we're going to work through in an R2 scope, and all the items that we have deferred or considered for future use will be things that we look at in our backlog, along with looking at what AU CDI R2 has proposed, to come together and decide on what we think we want to address in R2 and start working through those. There's one other item that isn't actually in the block vote. This is its own thing, and it's this issue in particular. There was an item raised around clarifying rules and licensing and copyright for terminology artifacts. And I've just copied the body of that out of the issue, so we don't need to go there. And that AU Core needs to clarify and put in place really those rules around our reference terminology artifacts for the different kind of third party, as well as not just the third party, the HL7 Australia content. this request has been passed to HL7AU, who is working through a licensing and an IP policy, which I think is actually currently approved by the board. And Brett, if you're on the line, did you want to give a little update on where this is at?
Yeah, so the HL7 Australia AU board has gone through getting some advice on IP policy and setting that across the organisation. So there's been an official IP policy document produced, which is going to be part of the HL7 Australia governance material and essentially an organisational document. So that has some effect as well in terms of the Fire IG content that's being produced, and essentially this item is then sort of under that policy arrangement. So yeah, part of what we're doing with the actual IG content is to draft a specific licensing details page, which is the aim is to have a page that's available for use on all HL7 Australia IGs, and also a clear position about the stating of licensing and copyright on actual fire artifacts that are part of those IGs as being part of the artifact material. So there's been a draft version of that put together, and that's still being worked on, but it's getting close to being sort of complete. And Ruben.
Thanks, Brett. I just wanted to clarify whether that document is going to address the governance rules aspect of this tracker item, and specifically, what obligations, pardon the pun, it puts on for example, organization like ADHA, who owns a value set that we may have a required binding to in AU Core. Obviously, there's the potential for breaking changes to occur as a result of them making changes. And the rules that underpin things like that is really what I was getting at with the governance rules side of this tracker item.
Yeah, I think that will need more consideration, because it's we will probably need to bring that into a organizational level discussion, I think probably with the ADHA as well, in terms of what NCTS does.
Okay, we can take that offline. No need to get into
I think that's a very good point, and I know Danielle's spoken to me about concerns like that recently as well. So I think we will have to come to at least some understanding, and obviously we want that documented as being the process by which the organizations are going to behave, because it definitely has an effect on the usability of the IGs if there's a problem there. So I think taking that on board, I think that's another aspect to this that we'll need to work on.
Is there any intent to move off the Creative Commons Zero license, or is it just clarifying?
At this point, no. At this point, it's I believe some of this has been questioned as part of the process, but I believe we'll continue on the Creative Commons Zero license. That's always been the premise of these publications, I think, and whilst this has been an opportunity to sort of look at all of the possibilities here, I think we'll be remaining on that at this point. It's something too that effectively it becomes the board will have to agree to this, and the actual IP policy document doesn't really say that Fire IG artifacts have to be Creative Commons Zero. It just gives it as an option that artifacts can be at that level. So I think the way we're going to operate is we really want to enable people to use the material, and I think also we are running against the fire spec, which is at Creative Commons 0, which we don't have control over either. So that has an effect as well, I think, in terms of what we would do as well. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on this one? Noting, I guess the proposal isn't fully formed for the AU Core TDG, though I don't really think there's anything in particular for us to vote on. We're waiting on, I guess, the advice really from HL7AU to define what these licensing, copyright and governance arrangements are and provide them so that we ensure that AU Core has the necessary material in it, adopts what we're advised that we need.
Yeah, and I think it will effectively, I think this probably affects, it is an organisational decision in terms of like a policy for HL7 Australia sort of work, and I think effectively the fire work group becomes probably responsible to checking that this exists in IGs downstream. But I think yeah, overall, I think I mean we'd welcome feedback on this when it becomes sort of there's something to review. But yeah, but effectively that would be going back to the board for kind of decision making on that. And you know, we are, you know, this is being reviewed from a legal perspective as well in terms of what things we should do as well. So yeah, so I think it'll be something that's thrust upon IG producers in HL7 Australia, but hopefully that also gives some certainty about how things are going to work.
Good. Thanks, Brett. Richard?
Given how long it takes organisations to process this stuff, probably need to tell the various other organisations like the ADHA something about this coming, because I wouldn't imagine ADHA could respond in anything under 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess if it's going to the legal departments to assess, but I think as well, like this part of this is really clarifying a position that's never been very clear in terms of the IG material, and effectively this really affects the HL7 Australia content and policies around that. So effectively, it's setting something for HL7 Australia itself to sort of limit its liability and other things as well, which are important, I think, in terms of that, and also, you know, just clarifying usage in so many ways. I think the things Ruben has talked about are probably really practical questions about where we have dependencies on things that we don't have. This operates at multiple levels because we don't have control over what HL7 International does effectively, right? So that's something that is, you know, part of the statement is sort of showing that and showing that HL7 International has its own sort of IP position and licensing position, but also things that we depend on like NCTS and any other kind of information sources and terminology sources and things like that. So yeah, part of it's just really qualifying what we do and things we do have control of and a position on the things that we do publish, but obviously trying to highlight where there's other considerations. So really at the end of the day, it's about the user of the spec having enough information to be able to go and make their own assessment on what on, you know, if they want to get their own legal advice about what it means, that's fine. And I think that's kind of how the world's operating at the moment anyway, with a lot of this material.
Ruben, do you have a exemplar that you think that could inform what that looks like in an IG? Sorry, are you aware of one that you could suggest or link to?
Ideally, the way these sorts of things get handled, at least at HL7 International, is through MOUs. And all the specifications they need to do is reference the MOU. So as an example, HL7 International has MOUs with Region 3 and Snowmade International for use of particular code systems and concepts within Fire and other implementation guides, and those things just get asserted in some sort of preamble in the spec. And the MOU is actually what sets out the agreements from both sides.
All right. Don't think I've ever
Yeah.
seen that in a specific OG. I think I've seen it in bystander.
Yeah, I'll try and find an example. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's
think-
the easier way
yeah,
to do it.
I think for certainty, yeah, an MOU would be the best, because that's essentially some operational certainty as well in terms of how things will work. So, and I think that's probably a good idea to be able to reference that. But yeah, I think that's something that we'll need to work on, and I think it does end up falling back on the HLSM Australia board to make that happen.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So yeah, but I think the work that's been done has been super helpful. Just even having an IP policy document that is actually in place, sort of highlights a number of the trademarks and things that are important and things like that as well. So I think that's a good start.
Thanks, Brett. I guess we'll look to an update on our May 16 meeting on where that is, and if we can formulate any kind of voting then, or if that gets deferred to a future meeting when that's, I guess, available.
Yep. Cool.
Okay, so quick reminder and process, because we've got our block votes out. So the weekly votes, the current set, the last set, are out until Wednesday. There'll be a reminder email sent Wednesday morning, and then we'll talk about them in the May 16 day. So just quick reminder for people on the line who are voting on the process, on how you vote when you're logged in. Here's a set of votes here, and while we have this information on how do you go about doing these things, what I really want to call out is how do you, when you review these items, if there's one thing that you think, look, this one doesn't belong here, I agree with everything else, but I think this one needs to be dealt with separately, what you need to do is you need to comment on the bottom of the Confluence page and call out the item and why you think it needs to be voted on separately, so we can schedule that as a separate kind of vote there. And for any item you think needs to be referred to Telecom, which isn't just because you don't agree, but because there are some specific points that aren't covered by either the issue itself or in the resolution descriptions, so some kind of additional thing that you think the TDG has to talk about, what you want to do is you want to tick refer to Telecom, and you want to add your comment here about what that issue is and what those points are. And that will also then go to the 16th of May, and you'll be asked to do that presentation on those talking points and guide that kind of technical design group discussion on what we're going to talk through. So those are those two options there. Otherwise, once you're logged in, you can tick affirmative, negative, or you can abstain if you don't feel comfortable voting, either affirmative or negative. It's just a quick process there. Last couple of things then, so that we get out on time. I do want to talk through, so 16th of May, there's the Eventbrite, sort of the QR code for that. If you do want to either join online or in person, use that QR code and register. It's in Sydney, it's in the Microsoft building. So here's our agenda of what we're going to be doing. And I do ask, if you can come in person, please come in person. We are going to try and make the hybrid work, but because it's at Microsoft, they're going to trial a very unusual workaround for them to do a Zoom call, because of course they're kind of Microsoft Teams kind of thing, and I don't know if it's going to work. So we've got some backups that we're kind of preparing, but it might be a terrible technical connection. That being said, here's the agenda for today. So we're really kicking off at 9, like in the room. But from 8:30, coffee and tea will be available. If you're coming in person, please, you can come at that time, register, get your little name badge, talk to people. What we really want are the people who are doing online to try and join at 8:45. Because what we're going to do at 8:45 is ensure that you're dialed in, that you can hear us, that you know how to participate, what those rules of the day are. So that would be really appreciated if you can do that. We'll be in the room with you trying to make sure it's all working. And then we kick off at 9 with a welcome, acknowledgement to country and introductions. We're going to have, I think there's about 70 people or so, 70, 80 people who've said they'll come. Most of those are face-to-face. I think some of those are from the CDG. So we're going to be doing a quick introduction to HL 7AU meetings and decision making, because today is a ballot reconciliation meeting, not a workshop, and give them some of that background on what are we doing when we call for motions. We'll go through in the agenda and do our usual business of approval of minutes. And then we're going to talk about the results of the block votes that are out now. That's 13 to 18, and any of those items that are referred to Telecom. We've just walked through how you can refer an item to Telecom if you want. And then after morning tea, we're going to get into ballot resolution topic 2/other change requests. The day itself with the agenda will be largely shaped by what the result of the voting is over the next week. That might be an intensive day talking in detail about certain items, or it may be where we can move to talking about some of those next steps in ballot reconciliation, about what are we doing now, and starting to talk about the FMM levels, the fire maturity levels for AU Core, our other change requests that exist, and also introductions around things like the variance process. And then we'll talk about those next steps and into AU Core testing, which is that next phase, once we've got this snapshot, to go through and do a number of events, trying to get some more testing on the core spec to refine it before our August ballot. Oops. And I'm going to end that there, actually. The last one after this is going through an entire other change request, which we don't have time to do because it is 1 minute to go. So any questions or comments from people before we close the meeting? All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll close that meeting there, and I hope to see you, or at least hear you, on May 16th as we do our last set of ballot reconciliation. Don't forget to vote in the electronic vote, please. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers. Thanks, bye.